Hey guys, welcome back to the Lawrenceville Bicentennial Podcast, the podcast where we talk to the people that know Lawrenceville best. As always, I'm your host, Nate McGill from Gwinnett Magazine, and today on the show, we're going to talk all about what we're doing right now, communicating. You know, life is a conversation, and the city also has a conversation that it's been having with its people for years now. We're going to meet the team behind that conversation, the communications team, the folks producing this podcast. Yes, indeed. All right, so without further ado, let's jump right in. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lawrenceville Bicentennial Podcast, the podcast where we talk to the people that know the city best. And today we're talking about to the people that talk about the city. We're talking about all the communication that happens in a city, which is something you don't really think about, but it's exactly what we're doing today on this podcast. So joining us, we have Captain Ortega joining us. He is the Public Information Officer for City of Lawrenceville. And of course, my producer, Melissa. Oh my gosh, you're here. It's the first time that we've convinced her to be on this podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, she writes most of the questions. She books most of the shows. She does most of the work. She makes me look really good when we're doing this show. And we've been doing this show for how long now? Like 3-4 years.
3 years.
It's unbelievable because we started this as, of course, the Bicentennial Podcast to celebrate the city's 200th birthday. And the show just kind of took off like gangbusters and people really enjoy it. So we just keep doing it.
Yes, we did. We were just going to do it 1 year. And then we just decided to keep going. And it was already branded. So we just kept the name and we just kept doing the Bicentennial Podcast.
Yeah. And there's more and more people to talk to. So we've really gotten to know through this medium, you know, all the different people in the city. And that's kind of what we're talking about today is just like, how do we get to know and get the word out about the city of Lawrenceville, both with the police department, both with the city itself and all the cool things that are going on. So why don't we go back and why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be, you know, a public information officer?
Well, first, as you said, I am a captain. I am over administration. I am part of the command staff. We have 3 captains, and then we have a major/assistant chief, and then the chief. So one of my many jobs right now is PIO, which is a public information officer. And it serves as a bridge between the community and the media. As you know, or as people know, everything that we do is public record.
Right.
Everything that we do is subject to open records law. So anyone can walk into our police headquarters and ask for reports. They can ask for body cam. They can ask for whatever they want to see, and we provide those things to them. So it's a very important job just to keep the community aware of what's going on.
Sure.
And so that's in summary, that's what I do. But there's more to it. I also see myself as a storyteller. I like to tell the good stories of what officers do on a daily basis. For the most part, when the media reaches out, you know, they're interested in chases, they're interested in the robberies, the homicides. They don't reach out and say, hey, can you tell me something good your officers did yesterday? That really doesn't happen. So I like to put those stories out.
Yeah,
so,
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the news in our national media, you know, runs off of attention, it runs off of advertising. So they want, you know, the explosion, the car chase, like you said, the crime numbers. And that kind of becomes both of your shared job of telling the story of Lawrenceville when people put in Google so that, like, you know, a homicide or something doesn't pop up first. Yeah. It's both the messaging coming out of both of your offices that kind of bring it together. It's kind of fascinating how that works. Well, how about you? Like, tell us, like, what is the role and what is your purpose with the city?
So the chief communications officer kind of oversees all communications for the city. And that's really important that all communications comes from one department. And we both have internal and external influence and contact. We handle all marketing, advertising, tourism, branding, media relations, all that kind of comes through my department.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't do it all by myself. I have 3 staff members, Elena, Sarah, and Arlene. So I certainly am not a one-woman show. I'm very fortunate that our city manager and the mayor and city council are supportive of communications. That has not always been the case.
Right.
If you really have an upper leadership that understand and appreciate communications, that makes your job a lot easier. I know you have a police chief who is very supportive of communications, so that is very important. I would say that it's very important that a city speak with one voice. And that doesn't matter if you're talking about releasing an events calendar or whether you're dealing with a crisis.
Right.
Everybody needs to be on the same page. And so it's very important that a city have a spokesperson. That doesn't necessarily mean that I am the spokesperson, but I have created the message, or Sal has created the message, and that everybody's on the same page. So that needs to be coordinated out of one office.
Right.
And so that is a really important part of having a city communications department.
Sure. Yeah. That you have like an answer when people have the questions about what's going on or what's happening. You need to have one voice.
Yes.
That just totally makes sense. Now, how did you guys get into your roles? So I want to back up just a little bit and ask, like, did you always know you wanted to be a police officer? Like how did you get into this?
So yes, ever since I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I know it's kind of funny, but I used to watch Cops.
Oh yeah.
The
show Bad Boys, what you gonna do?
We had one channel, I think it was Fox back then.
Yeah.
And Cops was one of the shows, and I was just fascinated with the blue lights, officers out there making arrests, driving fast. So that kind of fascinated me at an early age. And I remember when I was about maybe 5 years old, my dad and I were driving, and we had an accident. There was an officer that came out to help us that day, and that officer gave us a ride home.
Wow.
And I remember being inside the patrol car, listening to the radio, looking at the weapons, and that was it for me. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And that kind of helped me set up a roadmap of my life of what I needed to do and what I needed to stay away from. And to me, that's very important, because that one connection that I had with that officer that one time, even though it was brief, but for me, it changed my life forever.
Wow.
And that's why I tell officers that for them, every encounter they have, to them, it might be routine. It might be the 10th encounter they had with somebody, but for them, it means a lot. And for me, it's I owe who I am to that officer. I don't know his name, but I'll forever remember him.
Man, it's just so crazy. Like what 5 minutes of your time and the influence that you really have.
Yes.
And how that might direct your life. I'll never forget too, like even in my business of doing storytelling and everything as well, like same page as you guys, it was really just a guy who spent 5 minutes explaining the role he was in that I was like, wow, that's a cool gig. And then a couple of years later, the opportunity came to be. He has no idea. 5 minutes of your time could change somebody's destiny and their path. Also, just want to mention real quick, we have a thunderstorm happening right now. So just want to call attention to the rolling thunder that you may hear in the background on your podcast player or on this video. It's not any sound effects that we're adding to the show. Well, Melissa, how did you find yourself in this role of communications? Like, what's your background and how did you get to the city?
So I don't have anything as dramatic as what Sal just told you, but so I actually came from a fundraising background.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
So some of our younger folks who are listening to this may not believe this, but not everybody used to have a social media specialist or even a communications director.
That's true.
So back in the olden days, communications just used to be packaged up with the fundraising director.
Wow.
And,
okay. Yeah.
We didn't used to have all of these social media platforms that we have now. And so you just kind of had to kind of stick those two in one department.
Yeah.
And so I used to work in fundraising for a private school, and social media just exploded during that time.
Wow.
And it became just too much for one person to do. And I kept telling the head of school, we need a communication director. And she said, I know, but we don't have a budget for it. And so eventually I just decided that I got tired of driving into downtown. The bridge burned, all that whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I remember that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so, and I just found that I had a true love of the communications part of my job. I love to write, all that. So eventually I found myself at the city of Lawrenceville, and then people just sort of moved to having a communications director. And now I have a whole communications staff, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But 15 years ago, you didn't have a whole communications staff. You didn't even have a communications director in a lot of places.
It's true.
So a lot of the jobs that exist today didn't exist in 2012.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of how I ended up here. And so I'm very, very happy that this is a career option for me. And I love working with the city of Lawrenceville.
Yeah. Now you've always had like something to do with storytelling, I feel like,
Yes.
in some way. So you've always been telling the story, whether it was trying to raise funds or trying to do anything. Okay. So interesting fact. I did not know you sing.
I used to sing.
You used
I
to
only
sing.
sing in the car now. I don't sing.
Well,
I'll
you sang
sing
the
professionally.
national anthem at a couple of like pretty big events.
Many years ago, yes, I did. I sang the national anthem at the Braves game and at the Falcons game.
A couple times.
Twice each, yes.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That is.
That was when I was young.
Well, you got to be pretty good to be doing the big events. Now, why haven't you sang the Star Spangled Banner at Lawrenceville events? Like, why hasn't this happened yet?
Because I was always backstage watching the weather, watching the weather,
Watching
on
the
my
weather,
phone.
the weather that we have today. So there
Yes.
you go.
But
It's
that was a long time ago.
well, that's an interesting back story there. Interesting fact. Love that. Love that. Well, let's talk about some of the success stories that you both have had. I'm sure that in your time, you guys have had some of your favorite stories, some things that have happened in the city of Lawrenceville, whether it's the police department or the city, as a whole. Maybe share some of those stories. Like anything come to mind when you think about like just one of your favorite moments?
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, I kind of see myself as a storyteller for what the good things that officers do. And I try to put it out there. I use our social media to do that. And a lot of those stories have gained national attention. There was one recently where one of our sergeants, he tried to pull somebody over on 316. The driver took off from him and the sergeant didn't pursue. So he just turned off his equipment and continued driving. Then down the road, he realized that car had flipped. So he went into rescue mode and realized that the driver was trapped in between the car and the pavement.
Oh my gosh.
So he went into action along with some civilians that stopped and helped and other officers that showed up. They lifted the car and rescued the driver. So that story became a national story.
Yeah.
And they were getting interviews from pretty important news networks.
Right.
And so to me, that made me feel very good that we're showcasing Lawrenceville on a national level.
Yeah. Now that is interesting because it opens up like multiple storylines just about human compassion.
Yes.
And, the whys of like, what does it mean to be a police officer? That's like an amazing story. It's good for Lawrenceville. How about you? Like, what's your favorite success story?
I have several, but I want to share this one. I was invited over to Public Works to an employee luncheon that we were having for our sanitation department. And my former Public Works director called me over and said, hey, I want to introduce you to one of our trash truck drivers who I'd never met. And so I went over and was like, hey, I'm Melissa. And he was just such a nice gentleman. He'd worked for us for a really long time. And he's standing there with his plate of barbecue. And he said, I'm just going to eat this barbecue and then I'm done for the day. I'm going to go home because my day started at 5:30 a.m. And
Wow,
he said,
yeah.
and it's a beautiful day in Lawrenceville.
Mm.
And I just put that in my brain and thought, I'm going to remember this. So then we had a planning meeting with our creative team after that. And I said, y'all, this guy said this to me yesterday who works. He said, it's a beautiful day in Lawrenceville. And we were all like, we got to do something with that.
Yeah.
Well, then it became the theme of a sanitation campaign
Wow.
that we used to communicate all of our services, recycling campaign. It's now branded on the side of all of our sanitation trucks,
Yeah.
all from what he said to me. And so I think you always have to be listening for that little that little thing.
Yeah, you never know when it's going to become like a message or maybe even a mural.
It's going to be on the mural. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. On Monday, we're going to start painting a mural that's going to be on the side of McCray's Tavern. Now, by the time this podcast is released, it will probably already be painted, but we're going to have a new mural on the side of McCray's that says it's a beautiful day in Lawrenceville.
And it all came from a conversation. It all came from, it's great because really like your jobs are facilitating this conversation that we are having and have been having for a very long time with the city of Lawrenceville and all the folks in it. As you talked about earlier, when a few years ago, social media wasn't quite a thing, people would be talking amongst their family about the city thing. You would never know it. But now this conversation is very much public. And it's very much out there, and people are looking to have this conversation like in the view of a lot of other people. How do you guys manage the day-to-day just, I guess, alternate messages about your city? Like y'all are sort of the defenders of the faith for the city of Lawrenceville, if you will,
Well, I would say, the city has a lot of different arms. I have to explain this a lot. The city has a lot of different arms or interests. And that means we have a lot of messages that have to go out. And sometimes those intersect and sometimes they don't. So I challenge my team to always have really interesting social media content and to make sure that it is not just sort of a token post. We don't ever want to post a picture of a flag that says Happy Flag Day. That's just somebody's just going to scroll past that. And eventually they're going to say, I'm going to unfollow the city of Lawrenceville because they're just clogging up my feed. Right. We always want to have interesting social media content that goes out to all of the 89,000 people who follow all of our different platforms. And so if you think about that, we have, municipal government matters, we have economic development, art, utilities, events and tourism. That's all the different ways that we have to send out a message. Right. We have to make sure we can't just assume that that's all the same people that are following the city. Right. It may be different reasons that someone is following all that. I always talk about the circle of communications. If you think about it, you have our stakeholder in the middle of the circle, and you have all the ways that we communicate around them. I can't make that stakeholder go this direction. If you are someone who says, I don't do social media, I only want to go to the website to get information, I have to make sure that information is available in all of those areas. Sure. I can make one way a little more attractive, easier to get to, make sure everything is convenient, but ultimately, that stakeholder is going to decide where they're going to go for that information. Now, my challenge is there's always new technology. Is it, I have to check it out? Do I have the bandwidth? Do I have the budget for it? Is it secure? So we're always trying to figure out, do we want to add something new into that circle? Are we communicating? Do we have it in every place? Is it correct? That is a huge challenge for a communication department to make sure we've got the information out there for everyone. So that's kind of a challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you? Like, what are the key skills that really a PIO needs to know? Well,
they have to be very good with communication skills, with writing. You need good common sense. Otherwise, you can get your city in trouble, your department in trouble. I have a really good relationship with the local media. They're pretty good. I see them as partners. So anytime they reach out to me, I realize, okay, well, is this a story? What's their angle? Sometimes you don't know what their angle is. Are they asking because they want to air the story, or what is it? So working with them it's pretty fun. As Melissa talked about social media, I try to put out some meaningful content. I don't like putting things out just for the sake of putting things out. At the same time, we have to stay professional. We are a police department that we have to be serious about what we put out. We have to be professional And there could be some space for a little bit of humor every now and then, but we just can't forget who we are and what information we're putting out.
Right.
And I always have.
Yeah, you guys are held at a higher standard than most. Yeah.
Right. So I ask officers to keep me updated. If they see an incident that might be of interest to me, then they'll reach out to me and they'll say, hey, last night we had this incident. You might want to look at it. Mm-hmm. And then I'll look at it. And if it's good, then I'll put it out. And something that changed after COVID, before COVID, we used to do traditional media releases, and it was, a press release. You send it out to all the media outlets,
sure,
and they would get it, and then they would show it on their network. But after COVID, a lot of the media, they go to our social media channels, and if they like what we post, then they'll make a story out of it. So that's something that came out after COVID.
Yeah.
So
that is true. A lot of news is just coming right directly off the feeds, not the official press release. It's just, hey, I saw this, and just seeing it's enough.
Yeah. So when I put something out, I put it out knowing that it might make the news.
Yeah. That's a great walk away for anybody with any company or any message. Is just like, you have to think of every piece of content that you're creating as like a press release. Like this is something that could get picked up and run with. So we can't have any kind of nonsense in this. We need to look at it. Yeah, that's true.
We also do a lot of coordination together. I will look at a post and think, okay, does Captain Ortega really need to share this on the police social media? And then we share it from the police on the city.
Who's saying it?
Yes. Where does it need to go?
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of coordination, and we were able to add a social media specialist to our department this year, which is so wonderful.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
We have 89,000 social media followers. We have 15 profiles on 7 platforms.
Holy cow.
And it's just a lot.
Yeah.
So being able to have that person, and I can tell her, hey, Sarah, can you please coordinate with Captain?
She's busy.
Yeah.
First day.
Yes, first day. Yes. So that was actually such a great thing when that position got approved last year.
Yeah.
Elena in my office and I, we were very, very, very excited that day. Yeah. So that works really, really well for them to coordinate together and kind of think about where do we want people to go first.
Awesome.
And then be led after that. So that works.
Talking so much about like, the different outlets, the different ways, communication threads that we use, like whether it's social media or it's this podcast or it's the city's YouTube or, it's a press release or something like that. But it reminds me that messaging comes first, and messaging kind of becomes our top priority of, what is the message going to be? What are we writing? What is the story? What's the core? And then that kind of is what gets webbed out to all the different channels that we use to communicate, right? And we're kind of in the same business here, like this is the podcast, and you could be watching this podcast on YouTube, or you could be listening to it on Apple or Spotify or your own podcast player. You could be getting the e-news that we send out from Gwinnett Magazine, and you're listening to it on Gwinnett Magazine's site, or you could actually pick it up, and sometimes in the print magazine, you'll see a little QR code that'll link out to the episode. There's so many different ways. And just because folks have an interest in, let's just say, communications, or maybe they have an interest in, hey, why is my backyard flooding? And they're going to, dial into the stormwater episode, or, hey, I want to know all the updates in the city. Those episodes that we've done have just been gigantic because people want to know, well, what's all the new things coming to Lawrenceville, right? That message comes first. Like, what is the problem that people are trying to solve? What do they want to know? I would imagine that in this show, a lot of folks in businesses that are also trying to do communication, they're going to dial in. And if they have a business in the city of Lawrenceville, then they're going to want to know, like, well, how is my story going to be a part of the city's story? And what advice could you give to, like, maybe some of those businesses, some of those people who are also trying to tell their story? What have you learned that they can kind of put into practice that relates to like messaging? What gets people's attention? What works for you guys?
If you can have a staff person, if you can afford to have a staff person, that is money well spent. I think a lot of business owners try to do it all themselves. Even if you can hire an intern, Georgia Gwinnett College has a whole internship program. If you can hire a high school kid to come in after school and run your social media, that is money well spent. I think people think I can't afford that.
Right.
If you can offload that and have someone doing that for you, social media is so inexpensive and so effective.
Right.
If it's done well and it's done right. So I would say that initially is money well spent.
Yeah. Try to take that hat off of the business owner or someone who's facilitating and running the business and put it on, like, create a position for that.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yeah. So social media, the business owners need to realize it's very important. That is their way or their tool to communicate directly to their customers. In our case, we're communicating directly to our community.
Right.
And it's important to have not just one social media outlet, but multiple, because your audiences will have different, they'll go in a certain part of the population uses Facebook. Other parts of the citizens will use Twitter.
Wow,
so you kind of have to be on all the social media outlets so that you can reach everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just keeping up with that and making sure that they put out meaningful content and not just posting for the sake of posting, because as Melissa mentioned earlier, people will get bored and they'll stop following you.
Yeah.
So they have to use social media as a tool to communicate directly to their customers.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. I think that's real good. All right. So as we kind of come to a close here, what do you want everybody to know about city communications?
So I would have two things that I would love that everyone knew. First of all, is that there are only 4 of us in the city communications department, and that includes Captain Ortega. And there used to only be 2 of us. And the other thing I would love for people to know is that there are actual real people who manage our city social media. It's not some sort of bot that is responding. It's an actual real live person. Sometimes I think people don't realize that that's a live person that they're communicating with on social media. So that would be 2 things I would love for people to know.
Watch the rudeness, people. I'll say it. Stop being mean. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% with what Melissa said. There's somebody, a human behind that computer putting the message out. The other thing that I want to just mention is that people can reach us directly. They can contact me. And that is the beauty of our department, that anyone can reach out and ask the chief a question. We're always open, and all the information that we have is public. If anyone wants to know anything, they can just reach out.
Just ask.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Don't think about being that you do not know because you do not ask, people. So you can ask some intelligent questions of the city, and that information is available to you. So that's pretty good to know. Good to know. Well, guys, like, this has been fun. We could talk for hours and hours on this topic, I'm sure, because it's what we all do. And so just thank you so much for coming out. Is there anything else you guys would like to add before we break?
If there's something you don't know about the city, we have multiple websites, and you can usually find whatever you need there. Mm-hmm. Or on our social media. We try to be very complete with all of our information. So.
Well, I just have to say too that, like, this has been a fantastic experience for me, just to talk about the city that I grew up in. I grew up in Lawrenceville, and until I was 13 years old. So I left from Richards Middle, moved to Louisiana for a couple years, and then came back to my hometown and worked in Lawrenceville for quite a while. And, just to be able to do this podcast and to help share Lawrenceville's story is a great honor for me. To be able to MC the 200th birthday event that we did for the Bicentennial. Like, how did I become the guy with the microphone at that event? I have no idea. Well, I'll tell you, is this podcast
and because of this
podcast alone, but such an honor for this guy, because I love Lawrenceville. I grew up getting my hair cut at Simonton's Barbershop downtown, across from the courthouse square when that used to be there. And man, it means so much to me to be a part of this show. And so I just love it. So I appreciate you, having this old dude on the show to help communicate and tell the city's story. Captain, anything else you would like to add before we go?
Yeah, so I want to say thank you for your podcast. Before I came to work for the city, I was going online, doing some research, trying to find out everything that I could about the city.
Oh, wow.
And one of the very first things that I found was your podcast.
There we go.
And it was great because I also learned a lot about the city manager, Chuck.
Yeah.
During your interview. So that's when I realized, yes, that I do want to go work there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, your podcast serves as a way to communicate with people, but in my case, it also helped to recruit me. So,
wow. Yeah. Wow. Look at that. Making a difference right here at the table. Well, thank you for sharing that so much. I really appreciate you sharing that. I had a buddy of mine call not too long ago and say, hey, do you know David Still? Do you know that? Because he saw the podcast, you know. So anyway, pretty fun.
Well, I want to tell you one more funny thing too. After every time we release a podcast and people end up on our YouTube channel, it seems they scroll down and start watching other stuff that's on our YouTube channel.
Oh, that's good.
So the mayor came up to me and he said, did we re-release my hamburger videos? And I said, no. He said, well, I got people reaching out to me asking me if I'm judging the Hamburger Week video burgers again.
Yeah.
And that was like several months ago. And
Right.
I said, yeah. And I said, you know what I think's happening? I think people are watching our podcast episode and then they're just going down and watching whatever else is on there, and all your burger videos are on there.
Something else will
And
start
so
right
he
afterwards.
thought that was so great.
Yeah, it's great.
And so it's almost Burger Week again.
That's
and
true.
We're going to have some surprise burger tasters, and I'm not going to say what that is.
Can I be one? How do we get in on this? You know, were you invited? I wasn't invited.
No, but maybe next year.
All right. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lawrenceville Bicentennial Podcast. It's fun as always. I definitely enjoyed this conversation. Appreciate you guys coming out. Guys, please share this with anyone that you think might be interested in communications as a whole for whatever organization, or if they'd like to just know more about the city. Always subscribe on your podcast player so you never miss an episode. It's usually in the top right of most podcast players. And of course, subscribe to the city's YouTube and you'll never miss a show. Thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, you guys have a good one.